The Scifi, a state-of-the-art space vessel designed for long-distance exploration, cruised smoothly through the galaxy. Its sleek, silver hull glimmered as it cut through the stars, the epitome of human and alien collaboration. Ethan, a human engineer, leaned back in his seat, his brown eyes scanning the data streaming across the control panel. He had been on many exploratory missions, but this one carried a special weight. Next to him sat Kira, an alien from the planet Escharis. Her silver-hued skin shimmered under the soft glow of the cockpit lights, her lavender eyes calm but alert. Kira's people were known for their advanced technological knowledge, and Ethan had learned much from her during their joint missions. Despite their differences, they shared a mutual respect built on trust and shared experiences. As they approached the planet designated for exploration, the atmosphere on the ship shifted. Kira tapped the control panel, her voice steady but cautious. "We're nearing the planet's atmosphere. Prepare for descent." Suddenly, alarms blared, and the ship jolted violently. Ethan grabbed the edge of his seat, eyes wide. "What's going on?" he yelled over the chaos. Kira's hands flew over the controls. "Systems are failing. Something's interfering with our instruments." The Scifi spiraled out of control, and despite their efforts, the planet's gravity pulled them in. Ethan's heart raced as the surface of the unknown planet grew larger in the viewport. Kira's voice, usually calm and collected, was filled with tension. "Brace for impact." With a deafening crash, the ship collided with the planet's surface, skidding across the rocky terrain before coming to a halt. Silence followed, the aftermath of the violent descent leaving a stillness in the air. Ethan groaned, pulling himself up from the wreckage. His head throbbed, but he was alive. "Kira, are you all right?" he called out, his voice hoarse. A few moments passed before he saw Kira emerge from the debris, a cut above her eyebrow, but otherwise unharmed. "I'm fine," she replied, her voice firm. "We need to assess the damage." The alien landscape around them was harsh and uninviting, with towering rock formations and a sky tinged with shades of purple. The planet's two suns hung low on the horizon, casting long shadows. They had no idea what dangers awaited them in this hostile environment. Ethan and Kira worked quickly to salvage what they could from the wrecked Scifi. The communication systems were damaged beyond repair, and the power reserves were low. With no way to signal for help, they were truly stranded. Kira inspected the wreckage, her lavender eyes narrowing in concentration. "We need to focus on survival. The planet's atmosphere is breathable, but we don't know what kind of wildlife exists here." Ethan nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. "We should set up camp near the ship. We can use the remaining power to create a small energy shield for protection." Hours passed as they scavenged through the wreckage, gathering supplies. The tension between them was palpable, both of them aware that their survival depended on their ability to work together. Despite the gravity of the situation, Ethan couldn't help but admire Kira's resilience. She moved with purpose, her every action calculated and efficient. As night fell, the planet revealed its true nature. Strange, glowing plants illuminated the landscape, casting an eerie light across the rocky terrain. Ethan built a small fire while Kira activated the energy shield, its faint hum a reminder of the technology that kept them safe, at least for now. Sitting by the fire, Ethan broke the silence. "Do you think anyone will come looking for us?" Kira stared into the flames, her expression unreadable. "It's hard to say. We were far off course when we crashed. It could be days, weeks, or longer." Ethan sighed, the weight of their situation pressing down on him. "We'll figure it out," he said, more to reassure himself than Kira. "We always do." The following morning, Ethan and Kira set out to explore the area around the crash site. The planet's strange beauty was undeniable. Massive, jagged cliffs loomed in the distance, while peculiar flora and fauna dotted the landscape. But something felt off. There was an unsettling stillness to the air. They didn't have to wait long for the danger to reveal itself. While inspecting a nearby rock formation, Ethan heard a rustling sound behind him. He turned just in time to see a massive reptilian creature charging toward them. Its scales shimmered in the light, and its 6 legs carried it swiftly across the terrain. "Kira!" Ethan yelled, diving out of the way as the creature lunged at him. Kira reacted immediately, pulling out a small energy weapon from her belt. A sharp pulse of blue light shot from the device, striking the creature in the chest. It roared in pain but wasn't deterred. Ethan scrambled to his feet, grabbing a metal rod from the wreckage. As the creature turned its attention to Kira, Ethan sprinted toward it, thrusting the rod into its side. The creature let out a final, ear-splitting screech before collapsing to the ground, its body twitching. Breathing heavily, Ethan looked at Kira, who was still holding her weapon at the ready. "That was close," he muttered. Kira nodded, her lavender eyes scanning the horizon. "There will be more. We need to stay alert." As the days passed, Ethan and Kira fell into a rhythm, each day presenting new challenges. They faced off against more of the planet's dangerous wildlife, all while trying to repair the ship's systems and conserve their limited resources. One evening, while they were gathering water from a nearby stream, they encountered something unexpected. A group of small, humanoid aliens approached cautiously. Their skin was a deep violet, and they communicated through a series of clicks and hums. They were primitive compared to Kira's species, but there was intelligence in their eyes. Ethan and Kira exchanged a glance before Kira stepped forward, her hands raised in a gesture of peace. The aliens seemed to understand and slowly came closer, their leader gesturing toward the ship. "They want to help," Kira said after a brief exchange of sounds. Ethan raised an eyebrow, surprised. "Why would they?" Kira smiled slightly. "Sometimes, survival brings unlikely allies." The small group of violet-skinned aliens, now cautiously familiar with Ethan and Kira, had led them to a nearby cave system. Inside, they found a variety of tools and resources that could help repair the damaged systems of their ship. Ethan marveled at how the aliens, despite their primitive nature, had managed to craft such functional tools out of natural materials. While Kira communicated with their leader in clicks and hums, Ethan worked on scavenging what he could use for repairs. As he did, a nagging thought tugged at the back of his mind. Why were these aliens so eager to help? Their planet was remote, and they didn't seem to expect anything in return. "Kira, something's not right," Ethan whispered, glancing at the group. "It's like they knew we were here all along. Why would they have tools ready for us?" Kira, finishing her exchange with the alien leader, turned to Ethan, her expression unreadable. "They've been watching us since we crashed. They know this planet is dangerous. Apparently, we're not the only ones stranded here." Ethan's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "There's another group on this planet. Hostile, according to them. They don't come out during the day, but they've been hunting at night. The aliens say it's a dangerous force that has taken control of certain parts of the planet." Ethan's heart sank. As if being stranded on an alien world wasn't bad enough, now they had to worry about a potential enemy lurking in the shadows. He tightened his grip on the makeshift tool in his hand. "We need to finish the repairs and get out of here as soon as possible," Ethan said, his voice tense. "If they're right, we're sitting ducks out here." Kira nodded in agreement, but before they could continue, a deep rumble shook the ground beneath their feet. Dust and small rocks tumbled from the ceiling of the cave, and the aliens let out a series of panicked clicks. "What was that?" Ethan asked, his voice low. Kira's eyes darkened. "It's them, the hostile force." Suddenly, a low, eerie howl echoed from deeper within the cave system, sending chills down Ethan's spine. The violet-skinned aliens began backing away, fear evident in their movements. Without warning, one of the cave walls shifted, revealing a passage they hadn't noticed before. A cold wind swept through the opening, carrying with it the unmistakable stench of decay. "They're coming," Kira whispered, gripping her energy weapon tightly. Ethan stepped forward, his instincts kicking in. "We need to move, now." With the aliens leading the way, Ethan and Kira fled deeper into the cave, but it didn't take long before they heard the sound of footsteps, many footsteps, closing in behind them. The enemy was fast, and from the growls and screeches filling the air, it was clear they weren't the only creatures hunting them. As they raced through the tunnels, Ethan caught a glimpse of their pursuers. Tall, dark figures with sharp, angular limbs and glowing red eyes chased them through the shadows, their movements unnaturally swift. These weren't just wild animals, they were intelligent predators. "Kira, what are they?" Ethan shouted as they ran, his heart pounding in his chest. "They're called the Ravagers," Kira replied breathlessly. "They're an ancient species that once dominated this region of space. No one knows much about them, except that they're ruthless and unstoppable." As they rounded a corner, the group reached a narrow opening that led to the surface. Without hesitation, they pushed through, emerging into the eerie bioluminescent jungle. The twin moons hung high in the sky, casting an ethereal glow over the alien landscape. But the moment they stepped outside, they realized they weren't alone. Dozens of Ravagers emerged from the shadows, surrounding them in a deadly circle. Their red eyes gleamed in the dim light, and their grotesque, insect-like bodies twitched with anticipation. Ethan raised his metal rod defensively, though he knew it was a poor weapon against such creatures. "Kira." Before he could finish, Kira raised her energy weapon, firing a rapid series of blue pulses at the nearest Ravager. Several of the creatures screeched and fell, but more kept coming. Ethan fought off the ones that got too close, jabbing with the rod, but for every Ravager they took down, two more appeared. "We can't keep this up," Ethan shouted, sweat pouring down his face as he swung at a Ravager, narrowly missing its claws. Kira glanced around, her sharp mind racing for a solution. "We need to get to higher ground. Follow me." She led Ethan and the remaining violet-skinned aliens toward a steep cliffside, where jagged rocks formed a natural barricade. They scrambled up the rough surface, gaining some distance from the Ravagers below. For a moment, it seemed they might have a chance to escape. But as they reached the top, a massive figure loomed above them. It was unlike any Ravager they had seen, larger, more menacing, and with multiple glowing red eyes that locked onto them with terrifying intent. The Ravager leader. Ethan's heart raced as he prepared to fight once again, knowing that this battle might be their last. The massive Ravager towered over them, its grotesque form framed by the eerie glow of the twin moons. Its multiple eyes flickered, each one scanning Ethan, Kira, and the group of violet-skinned aliens. Low guttural growl rumbled from its throat, vibrating through the ground beneath them. Ethan tightened his grip on the metal rod, but he knew this was a fight they couldn't win head-on. The leader was too large, too powerful. They needed a plan, and they needed it fast. "Kira," he whispered, "what do we do? There's no way we can take that thing down with what we've got." Kira's eyes darted around, scanning their surroundings for any advantage. "We have to be smarter, not stronger. This thing isn't invincible." She turned to the violet-skinned aliens, communicating in clicks and hums. The leader of the small group nodded and pointed toward a nearby rock formation. The aliens scrambled in that direction, quickly positioning themselves behind the rocks, waiting for a signal. Ethan watched, confused. "What are they doing?" "They're setting a trap," Kira explained, her voice steady despite the rising tension. "The rocks, they're unstable. If we can lure the Ravager leader to that formation, we can bring the whole thing down on it." Ethan swallowed hard, glancing at the creature that still loomed above them. "And how exactly are we supposed to do that?" Kira gave him a sharp look. "We need bait." Ethan's stomach dropped as the meaning of her words sank in. Before he could protest, Kira had already started moving, firing her energy weapon at the Ravager leader. The pulses struck its hide, causing it to let out an ear-splitting roar. Its eyes flared with fury, and it charged toward them with terrifying speed. "Kira!" Ethan shouted, instinctively running after her. She was fast, but so was the Ravager. It barreled toward her, its 6 legs pounding the ground, closing the distance in seconds. Ethan pushed himself harder, his heart racing as he watched the massive creature gain on her. "Get to the rocks," he yelled, but Kira didn't need the reminder. She was already leading the beast toward the formation, her eyes focused, her every move calculated. The Ravager lunged, its sharp claws swiping at Kira just as she dove behind the rock formation. The violet-skinned aliens had positioned themselves perfectly. With a few quick, well-placed strikes to the base of the rocks, the formation began to crumble. Ethan barely had time to react. "Kira, get out of there," he shouted, but Kira didn't move. She stayed hidden behind the rocks, waiting for the exact moment to spring her trap. The Ravager leader, blinded by its rage, charged forward, smashing into the unstable rocks with its full weight. There was a deafening crack as the formation gave way. Massive boulders tumbled down, crashing onto the Ravager's body, pinning it beneath their crushing weight. For a moment, the world seemed to stand still. Dust and debris filled the air, and Ethan could barely see through the thick cloud. His heart pounded in his chest as he searched frantically for Kira. "Kira," he called out, his voice hoarse. There was no response. Panic surged through him as he scrambled toward the rubble, shoving rocks aside. His hands were raw and bleeding by the time he uncovered a familiar figure. Kira lay beneath the debris, her lavender skin smeared with dirt and blood. She was alive, but barely conscious, her breathing shallow. "Kira!" Ethan dropped to his knees, gently lifting her into his arms. Her eyes fluttered open, and she gave him a weak smile. "Did we get it?" she asked, her voice faint. Ethan glanced back at the pile of rubble where the Ravager leader was buried. Its massive form was still, its many red eyes now dark. "Yeah," he said, choking back a wave of emotion. "We got it." The violet-skinned aliens emerged from their hiding spots, clicking and humming in what seemed to be a gesture of gratitude. They gathered around, offering Ethan and Kira what little aid they could. Despite their primitive nature, the aliens were resourceful, using local herbs to treat Kira's wounds and providing them with water and food. Ethan stayed close to Kira's side, refusing to leave her as she recovered. They had survived the worst of the danger, but the threat of the Ravagers still lingered. Even with the leader defeated, there could be more out there, lurking in the shadows. As the night wore on, Kira slowly regained her strength. She sat up, wincing as she adjusted her position. "We need to finish the repairs," she said, her determination undiminished. "We can't stay on this planet any longer." Ethan nodded, though he was reluctant to push her too hard. "We'll get the ship fixed, but you need more time to rest." Kira shook her head. "Time isn't a luxury we have. The Ravagers know we're here, and they'll keep coming. We have to be ready to leave by morning." Ethan sighed, knowing she was right. They had to move quickly if they wanted to survive. As they prepared for the final push to repair the ship, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was still off. The Ravagers had been a threat, yes, but there was something more, something bigger happening on this planet. He glanced at Kira, who was focused on the task at hand, and made a silent vow. They were going to survive this, together, no matter what else the planet had in store for them. The dawn broke over the alien landscape, casting long shadows across the jagged cliffs as Ethan and Kira prepared for what they hoped would be their final day on the planet. Kira had recovered enough to stand, though her movements were slow and labored. The violet-skinned aliens watched from a distance, their deep eyes reflecting a mix of curiosity and concern. They had done all they could to help, but the rest was up to Ethan and Kira. The ship still lay in pieces, but the most crucial systems, navigation, life support, and propulsion, were nearly operational. They had scavenged parts from the wreckage, and improvised repairs using the little technology Kira had on hand. It was a patchwork job, but it would have to hold long enough to get them off the planet. Ethan tightened the last bolt on the makeshift fuel system and wiped the sweat from his brow. "This should do it," he said, glancing over at Kira, who was working on the ship's power core. "How's it looking over there?" Kira didn't look up. Her fingers flew over the control panel. Her lavender eyes narrowed in concentration. "We'll know in a minute." He nodded and stepped back, watching her closely. Even weakened, Kira's determination never wavered. Ethan had never met anyone like her, so focused, so resilient. She was unlike any human or alien he had ever encountered. And now, after everything they had been through together, he felt a connection to her that went beyond mere survival. Suddenly, the ship's control panel lit up with a soft hum. The lights flickered on, and a series of beeps indicated that the systems were coming online. Kira stood up, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "We've got power," she said, relief evident in her voice. Ethan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Now we just need to hope it holds long enough to get us out of here." Kira's smile faded as she looked out toward the horizon. "There's one more thing." Ethan followed her gaze and froze. In the distance, a cloud of dust was rising. Telltale sign of something large moving toward them. His heart sank. "The Ravagers," he muttered. "They're coming." Kira's face hardened. It was only a matter of time before they sent reinforcements. "They won't let us leave without a fight." Ethan glanced at the ship, then back at the approaching cloud. "Can we take off before they get here?" Kira shook her head. "We need at least another 10 minutes to stabilize the systems, but they'll be on us before then." His mind raced. They couldn't hold off a full assault from the Ravagers, not with just the two of them and a handful of primitive allies. But they didn't need to win. They just needed to survive long enough to get the ship airborne. "We'll hold them off," Ethan said, turning to Kira. "I'll distract them, buy you time to finish the repairs." Kira's eyes widened in protest. "You'll be killed." He shook his head firmly. "Not if I'm smart about it. I can lead them away, make them chase me. Just keep the ship ready." Kira's expression was a mix of fear and frustration. "I'm not letting you sacrifice yourself for this." Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder. "I'm not planning to die, Kira. But if we don't try something, neither of us is getting off this planet. You're the best chance we have to make it." For a moment, they stared at each other, the weight of their situation hanging in the air. Then, reluctantly, Kira nodded. "All right," she said quietly, "but you better come back." Ethan gave her a lopsided grin. "Count on it." Without wasting another second, Ethan sprinted toward the horizon, the metal rod in his hand the only weapon he had left. The Ravagers were fast, their six-legged forms moving with terrifying speed. He could hear their guttural growls echoing across the landscape as they drew closer. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, but he forced himself to keep moving. He had to lure them away, far enough that Kira could finish the repairs without being overwhelmed. The terrain was rough, with jagged rocks and uneven ground, but Ethan pushed himself harder, weaving through the landscape in a desperate attempt to stay ahead of the beasts. The first Ravager lunged at him, its claws slicing through the air where he had been just moments before. Ethan ducked and rolled, narrowly avoiding its attack. He scrambled to his feet and kept running, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He had to stay ahead, just a little longer. But as he dodged another swipe, something sharp caught his leg. He stumbled, crashing to the ground with a grunt of pain. The Ravagers were closing in, their snarls growing louder. Ethan's vision blurred, the edges of his consciousness flickering. This was it. This was where it ended. But then, a flash of light erupted in front of him. The pulse of energy shot past, striking the lead Ravager square in the chest. It howled in pain, rearing back as more energy blasts followed. Ethan blinked, struggling to process what was happening. Kira. She stood at the entrance of the ship, her weapon raised, firing pulse after pulse at the oncoming ravagers. The violet-skinned aliens had joined her, throwing rocks and spears in a desperate attempt to drive the creatures back. Ethan forced himself to his feet, his body screaming in protest. He limped toward the ship, every step feeling like an eternity. But with each pulse of blue light, the ravagers fell back, retreating under the relentless barrage. Finally, Ethan reached the ship, collapsing onto the ramp just as Kira fired the last shot. The ravagers hesitated, then turned and fled into the distance. Kira rushed to his side, her face pale with worry. "You idiot," she breathed, pulling him into the ship. "I told you not to die." Ethan chuckled weakly, wincing as the pain in his leg flared up. Wasn't planning on it. They limped together into the cockpit, where the control panel blinked with readiness. The ship was ready to take off. Kira strapped in and activated the engines. The ground rumbled as the ship lifted off, leaving the planet and the ravagers behind. As they soared into the sky, Ethan leaned back in his seat, exhausted but alive. He glanced over at Kira, who gave him a tired smile. "We made it," she said softly. Ethan nodded, a wave of relief washing over him. "Yeah," he replied, "we did." The stars stretched out before them, endless and full of possibility. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The ship hummed softly as it soared through the vastness of space, leaving the hostile planet far behind. Ethan sat in the co-pilot seat, his leg bandaged and propped up, staring out at the sea of stars stretching endlessly before them. Despite the exhaustion that weighed heavily on him, a strange sense of peace settled over his heart. For the first time since the crash, they were safe. Kira, seated in the pilot's chair, guided the ship expertly, her eyes fixed on the console as she charted their course toward the nearest space station. The violet-skinned aliens had gifted them coordinates to a remote outpost before their departure, a place where they could regroup and call for help. It would take a few days to get there, but for now, they had everything they needed: air, food, water, and each other. "Leg holding up?" Kira asked, glancing over at him with a faint smile. Ethan chuckled, shifting slightly to ease the dull throb of pain. "It'll survive. Thanks to you." She gave a short laugh. "Don't thank me yet. We're still days away from safety." "We'll make it," he said with quiet confidence, his gaze still on the stars. "We've come this far. What's a few more days?" Kira nodded, though her expression remained serious. "I didn't expect any of this," she admitted softly. "When I found you, I thought you'd just be another problem I had to deal with. I never imagined we'd end up fighting side by side." Ethan turned to face her, his eyes meeting her lavender gaze. "Neither did I, but I'm glad we did. We make a good team." She hesitated for a moment before responding, her voice almost hesitant. "You saved my life, Ethan, more than once." "And you saved mine," he replied, shrugging. "I guess that makes us even." Kira didn't respond right away. Instead, she stared out at the stars, her expression distant. "I've spent my whole life following orders, doing what's expected of me," she said quietly. "But for the first time, I made a choice. I chose to trust you." Ethan frowned slightly, sensing the deeper meaning behind her words. "Do you regret it?" She shook her head slowly, her eyes softening. "No, not at all." Silence fell between them, the gentle hum of the ship the only sound. They had both been through so much, their fates intertwined by circumstance and necessity. But somewhere along the way, something more had grown between them. A bond forged in battle, in survival, and in trust. As the stars outside the window flickered like distant memories, Ethan felt the weight of their journey lifting. They had escaped death more times than he could count, fought against impossible odds, and somehow they had won. "Where do you go after this?" Kira asked suddenly, her voice pulling him from his thoughts. Ethan shrugged, though there was a wistfulness in his tone. "Not sure. Probably back to Earth, if I can get a ride." Haven't seen home in a long time. Kira nodded, but there was something unspoken in her eyes. And after Earth? He raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Why? What are you planning? She hesitated, then smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her in days. Don't know, she said softly, but maybe I don't have to follow a set path anymore. Maybe we can find our own. The idea caught him off guard, but it didn't feel unwelcome. In fact, it felt right. The universe was vast, and there was still so much out there to explore. He had spent most of his life wandering, never quite finding his place. But now, with Kira beside him, maybe there was more out there than just survival. Maybe we can, Ethan agreed, the hint of a smile playing at his lips. Kira turned back to the console, her fingers flying over the controls as she made minor adjustments to their course. But there was a new energy between them now, a shared understanding that whatever came next, they would face it together. As the ship sailed through the infinite expanse, leaving the dangers of the alien planet behind, Ethan allowed himself to relax. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, that uncertainty didn't feel daunting. It felt like an opportunity, an adventure waiting to unfold. And as they drifted toward the unknown, Ethan couldn't help but feel that this was just the beginning of something greater. Whatever came next, they were ready. Together.